Good evening, gospel revolutionaries around this entire world. Welcome to the Room of Rooms, which is about to change a little bit. Instead of explaining it to you, I will show it to you, possibly next week. If not, it'll be the following week. Anyway, things are always changing. I've always been very much conducive to change. People say, yeah, he's very polite. I actually do love change. I've never had a problem with it. The one of the problems that I had with change is that I got married to somebody who absolutely detests change. So she was flying by the seat of her pants all the time, everywhere we went, and then it was something else and doing more and changing this and changing that. And ever since our divorce, she has lived in this 2 years ago now, I think it is. She has lived in the same house with the very same furniture that we had all those years. And she's not gone anywhere. She's had the same driveway, everything. In 20 years, I can't name the number of places I've lived. Anyway, that's a little side story. Again, welcome to this Tuesday night. Pardon me for not producing the shows this last couple of weeks. We just have so much going. I've found it a little challenging to take any subject that we are neck deep in now, such as the 1,000-year reign of Christ, which has proven to be one of the most major changes and understanding, speaking of changes, in understanding of the entire gospel. It does place all 46,000 denominations on very thin ice. And actually, it takes away all of the support because all of them are based on pre, mid, or post millennial. And all of that has to do with the 1,000-year reign, and they all missed it. We've proven it now with 11 sessions on the 1,000-year reign. Now, if you listen to the Canada conference and said, oh no, Mike, there was just 6. You got to keep up. We're still adding to that conference. The titles are all going to have the 1,000-year reign of Christ in them. And the series that Daniel and I have continued to do that comes out every Friday, they are all extensions of that teaching. And what a teaching it is. What an amazing thing. We've been on the last 2 sessions, number 10 and number 11, I believe it is. We have been clarifying the bookends of the 1,000-year reign, which is King Saul and the Saul of Tarsus. Saul, the tribe of Benjamin, and Saul of Tarsus, who was of the tribe of Benjamin. And the correlation between those 2 tribes throughout the 1,000-year reign. Here I go. I'm going to stop right there and refer you to the amazing information that is, especially on YouTube. It seems like that's where most people get our information. A lot of them do. Literally thousands of people are watching these on multiple platforms, and we encourage you to get involved and ask questions. It really is quite amazing. Anyone of any doctrine, of any belief, should have a great interest in going into this and seeing whether or not these things be true. Did the 1,000-year reign begin exactly when David said it began, and did it end exactly when Paul said it would end? It really is quite amazing. And it is amazing that there is that period of time that I just referred to as exactly 1,000 years. So I was been for the last couple of weeks, I've been thinking about, even though we're in these very almost lofty things about the gospel and things that we never really dreamed that we would ever be venturing into. And the thing that has been coming back to me, though, is this issue of belief. What a profound thing happened to us and to many people in the world when we found out that believing was not. Let me repeat that we found out that believing was not a means to salvation or redemption. The believing that we do simply it is the comprehension or the apprehension of the thing that's already done. Believing has been taught that it's the thing you got to do to get it done. Believing doesn't get anything done. Believing accepts what has been done. Now, even if you turn it down and you don't accept it, it does not negate what has been done. When all is said and done, everyone is righteous and holy. And we want to go through this really brief teaching. And I want you to be able to share this with other folks. And even if you don't share the video, you can go through this very quick. I always say very quick, and it never happens, right? But we're wanting to go through this as quickly as possible, just to remind ourselves of our roots, our understanding of the gospel and the issue of belief, and also the issue of judgment. John 3:16 is where you always have to start, right? So John chapter 3, verse 16, and you'll have to forgive me, I'm on my Bible program, and I'm going to use it to jump around. So John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. Now, this is the demonstration of God's love. Daniel and I did an in-depth research and teaching about love and about the word, the agape or agapeo. And the agape is always a word of action. It is not a feeling or an emotion. Certainly doesn't eliminate a feeling or emotion, but that's not what the term agape is about. It's about an action. It's about a deed. It's doing something to demonstrate the care for someone. God demonstrated his love, his care for the world, so much that he gave his only begotten Son. So this was an act of the love of God. Now, some people don't even allow God to demonstrate his love because they do not accept that Jesus was the only begotten Son of God, born of a virgin. You have no Son of God if you have no one born of a virgin. I know that Father Murray and many of our mystic friends, they just get all tickled with glee. I remember sitting to other teachers like Bishop Spong and them actually laugh about the virgin birth, and then tell you that they have found out in the scriptures that the word virgin means maid. And it's just a young maid. And then they take that into an Anglo-Saxon word and say a young maid is just a young girl. However, I've checked up on these guys because I wanted to know. And other than the stories that Mary actually said, seeing that I have not been with a man, how shall these things be? Other than saying that this was a lie. There's about 50 verses in the Hebrew text with that word that is quoted directly from that in the New Testament about Mary having a child, for unto us a child is born. And the terminology about Mary and her being a virgin. There's about 50 verses, and I looked and they were right. There are times that word is translated as the word maid. The other times it is translated as the word virgin. But they are all exactly the same Hebrew word. And guess what it's talking about as subject matter in all 50 cases? It's talking about a young girl who has never had sex. In fact, really implies too young to even be thinking about having sex in many cases. So I don't care that somebody doesn't believe in the virgin birth. Believing or not believing is not going to serve anybody any good whatsoever. But it does. It calls me into action when they say that the scriptures confirm what they're saying. And I can tell you that Father Murray and Bishop Spong, who has long passed away, and anyone else who tries to say that this term virgin, that they find scriptural support that this was not some girl who had never had sex, and that's just silly. Well, you might think it's silly, and you very well may believe it. And I'll just love you to pieces, whether you think that Mary was a virgin or not. But you're not going to get by with saying that the scriptures support your point, because it does not. In 50 cases, it absolutely refutes what people are saying about the non-virgin condition of Mary at the conception of Christ. A little side story there that you need to maybe look a little more into. So he says, this is how God chose to demonstrate his love to us, that he gave his only begotten Son. And the term, this is his only born Son. So even the term only begotten, just that term means that this is his seed. This is his offspring. And God created Adam, and Adam was never God's offspring, and neither was anyone who came from Adam. We did not become the offspring of God until through the work of the cross, and that done through a virgin birth. The only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish but have everlasting life. The most quoted verse in the entire Bible. You'll see it on people's eyelids. John 3:16. You'll see it in the under cheek cosmetics that they put on playing football. You'll see it on foreheads. You'll see it in tattoos. John 3:16. And everybody's got to believe. Well, it would be interesting and very, very nice if people actually read the book of John. We find that the book of John makes reference to believing over 90 times. Matthew, Mark, and Luke makes reference to believing approximately 25 times each. If you add them all up together, there's about 75. I just divvied them up and gave them each 25. So I don't know how many each of them are. But obviously, if you want to know about believing, you've got to look to the book of John. So that's what we're going to do. This is what I did more than 40 years ago, and it flipped my world right upside down, or should I say right side up for the first time. For God sent not his Son into the world. The word world, we make much about that because it is translated in different ways. That word is cosmos. That means the entire world. For God did not send his Son into the entire world to condemn the entire world, but that the entire world through him might be saved. And this terminology in the King James is really atrocious. There is no might be. It is but that the world through him saved. The world through him saved. This might be, should be, shall be. Almost in every case, might be, should be, shall be, shouldn't be. But it shall be there until you do some study for yourself and look and see there are no Greek words for this. There's nothing to support this at all. So, case closed, right? Everybody that believes in Jesus will have life. Everyone that does not believe in him will be condemned. There's a little problem with that, for God sent not his Son into the world to condemn the world. So if by God sending his Son into the world that you had to believe in Jesus, and the vast majority of people since the cross have not believed, then through Christ, the world has been condemned. Let me say that once again. If God sent his Son into the world and required believing, but then made the statement that God did not send his son into the world to condemn the world, if it is inferred that not believing condemns you, then by virtue of the fact that Jesus even showed up, virgin birth or not, he condemned the world. He didn't save the whole world. He condemned the whole world. So, except for those believers, right? So we're going to look at that a little bit further, and I really encourage you to ask your friends to listen to this. Ask your Baptist friends, Methodist, Pentecostal, Catholic. It ought to be of an interest because all we're doing is letting this speak for itself. So you've got to believe. So let's check in on some believers. So we're going to John chapter 6, verse 28 and 29. And this is John chapter 6, and we are going to verse 28 and 29. Then said they unto him, What shall we do that we might do the works of God? Jesus answered and said unto them, This is the work of God, that ye believe on him whom he hath sent. And he goes on into this in much greater detail. We're not going to do that right now. You are certainly welcome to go in and read all the rest of it. It is a marvelous story and contains a whole lot more than what I'm going to bring out to you today. So they asked Jesus, so we want to do the works of God. So what is the works of God that humans have to do? The only work of God that humans were required to do was to believe. But what Jesus did also affirm is that believing is a work that only God can do. Now that's why you have the Calvinist and the Arminian and their teachings about predestination, and since they can't take predestination out of Ephesians chapter 1 and throughout the Bible, then they say, but you have to believe. So then they say, well, you had to be predestined to believe. It just gets so screwy. It absolutely gets screwy. We're going to try to unscrew it today, and hopefully it'll make at least more sense than what you've heard in the past. So we have these powerful verses here. And then the one that is really quite shocking is Jesus's declaration in John chapter 14 and verse 12. Jesus said, Verily, verily, I say unto you, he that believeth on me, the works that I do shall he do also, and greater works than these shall he do, because I go unto my Father. Now, I've heard more shuck and jive and dance and twirl around this. Pentecostals are absolutely convinced that they're going to eventually be able to do this. Nobody's done it. Nobody has done it, no matter what you've heard. In fact, isn't it amazing now that we have the ability to video virtually everything that happens on the planet? We used to hear about miracles happening in Africa and Australia and other parts of the world, and people would go on mission trips and come back and talk about the blind seeing and the deaf hearing and the mute talking, and people that had no legs growing out. But since we've had the ability to document everything with a cell phone, and actually in the vast majority of the cases, broadcast it live. But where you're not able to broadcast it live, it is all places on earth have somebody around that can push a button and record what's happening. You don't have to have a film crew anymore. But it's amazing how miracles have dropped off just simply because we're able to document and find out whether or not these things are true. Well, they're not true. But Jesus did tell us what a believer was. He said the believer would be able to be identified by the fact that they'd be able to do the works that he had done, but even greater works. And the term greater works here means greater in every way, in volume, in number, in size, more. You'll be able to do way more than Jesus did. I think if this world ever saw somebody that did more than what Jesus did, they'd dump Jesus and start following the guy. That's just how fickle people are. Knowing the truth that is in Christ has nothing to do with miracles. Absolutely nothing to do with miracles. And the miracles that it does have to do with, the world is now turning away with, such as a virgin birth and the death, burial, and the resurrection of Christ from the grave. Those are the miracles that we need to be focused on, and the impact of those miracles. There's a reason there was a virgin birth, and there's a reason that raising from the dead by someone who was born of a virgin changed everything. This is before the cross, obviously, but here Jesus has made it very clear. I was sitting here, as I've told you, with my new trainer, and sharing with him. He was raised by a father whose pastor, still is pastor, and we sat down, and I took 10 minutes of his time and went through what I'm actually sharing with you right now. I can do it in 10 minutes. It's just, I get on here and you guys won't let me quit. So we have identified what a believer looks like. They can do the same thing Jesus did and even greater. And as I asked David that day, I said, do you know any believers? And he said, what do you mean? I said, we've just had them described here. It says that believers will be able to do the same works that Jesus did and even greater. And I said, do you know any believers? And he said, I do not know any believers. So he didn't do any, ifs, ands, buts, or maybes. He didn't get on the defensive because he's had questions, about these things all of his life. So he just answered the question honestly. If you answered this question honestly, you're going to have to say, you do not know a believer. If this is a believer, and if this is not a believer, then Jesus is a liar, and we can just all close the book and go home, as they would say. But if this does not describe a believer, then we have nothing to believe. And because Jesus is the one that said this is what a believer will do. They'll do even greater works. They'll do what I have done, heal the sick, cleanse the leper, raise the dead, and even greater works than these. And I've heard that taught, and they will song and dance and pivot and twist and twirl in every direction to try to, and the Pentecostals will shout, and but the only miracle that will have happened is somebody got pushed down. Pentecostals push each other over. They swear they don't do it, but I used to do it. So we know what a believer is. And we read in John 3:16 about the condemnation that Jesus said, I didn't come to condemn. And that word condemn is the same word as the word judge. It's a little different between the particular part of speech that it's used as in the way that it's spelled, but it's still the same word. And the word judgeth is Krino, and Krisis is the other word. And it is used interchangeably based on the part of speech that it is being used in, as best I can tell. So who's a believer? Number one, you absolutely have to believe. But the problem is that if you don't believe, God didn't send his son into the world to condemn the world, but by simply his being here and requiring people to believe, God did condemn the whole world. Think about it. When you get rational, when you get your thinking brain on and get out of your denomination brain and you get out of your believing brain, if God loved the world so much that he sent his son into the world because he wanted to save the world and not condemn the world, and then say that whoever believes in him is the ones that's going to get saved. By pure definition, if there are more people who don't believe than do believe, then God sent his son to condemn the world. The statement would be false. How do we rectify that? How do we rectify God lying to us? It's obvious that he didn't send his son into the world to redeem the world. It's obvious that he didn't send him to save the whole world because the whole world hasn't believed in him, and less believers all the time. Oh, I know. Now we've got the ability to photo a whole bunch of people supposedly getting saved, and so now that looks like the whole world. I'm sorry, those meetings where you've got a group of people out saying the sinner's prayer, that's not the whole world, folks. So it kind of sounds like I'm down on Christ. I'm not down on Christ. It sounds like I may be down on Christianity. I'm way down on Christianity. You want to know why I'm down on Christianity? It is a lie. Well, there I did. Now you can't share it with anybody. Turn with me to John chapter 12. We're all still in the book of John. You know, sometimes you need to stick with the book you're in and find out what it has to say about that subject. Go to the other books after that, but at least extract what you can out of the single book that you're studying in on the subject that you're studying on, because the writer may have had more things to say about that. So in John chapter 12, and many of you guys are saying, Mike, this is all old stuff. We've heard this before. And, you know, for those of you that this is the first time you're hearing it, you're saying, oh, my God. But I almost know that those of you that have heard me say this 50 times already, you're sitting there just with a big smile on your face, because every time I go into this subject, it does the same thing to me that it did the very first time that I saw it. More than 40 years ago. So we are in John chapter 12, verse 12:31. I need to move down a little bit. John 12:31. Now look what Jesus says here, and this is just before the crucifixion. This is led up through the life of Jesus. In the book of John. We're up to chapter 12, and we get into the crucifixion, I think, in chapter 13 and 14. And but what we're seeing now is this lead up to the cross. And Jesus says, you say, well, how near was it? Well, Jesus said, now is the judgment of this world. And now means this is taking place. It's already started in motion. Now is the crisis of this world. Remember what God said that he did not send his son in the world to do to people? Jesus says, now it's time to do this to people. I think that's just all too messed up. Maybe we should read a little further. Now is the condemnation and the judgment of this world. Now shall the prince of this world be cast out. And I, if I be lifted up from the earth, will draw all unto me. You say, now, Mike, wait a minute. That verse says that he will draw all men unto me. And it's interesting here. I'm sorry, I'm looking at it means that the term draw means to drag. I'll drag your ass. I'm sorry. But that's what happened. This is where that we all. One of the writers put it in the terms. Paul said that the love of God constraineth us. This one says he'll drag your ass. I'm sorry. But it doesn't. It's not saying all men. What he's going to drag unto himself, because the word men is italicized. Now, you can use men in there. It works just fine for the gospel, but that is not the subject. The subject here is judgment. Now is the judgment of this world. And I, if I be lifted up from the earth, will draw all. The subject is judgment unto me. He said, I'm going to drag all judgment unto myself. See, I didn't have to say drag your ass at all. I just wanted to. And I, if I be lifted up from the earth, I will draw all judgment, that is the subject, unto me. Now Jesus is, you say, well, now how do you know that's about the cross? All you got to do is read a little further. And I, if I be lifted up from the earth, will draw all. What does being lifted up from the earth mean? This, verse 33, this he said, signifying what death he should die. The people answered him, we have heard out of the law that Christ abideth forever. Now, when you hear it say, we've heard out of the law, he's talking about the first 5 books of Moses, the entire history of the first part of all of this. We have heard out of the law that Christ abideth forever. So they did have this right, that Christ abides forever. And may we wake you up just a little bit that Christ has abided forever, even before he showed up as Yeshua Christ. Christ was already abiding. He was abiding even as the writer John said, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. Christ was already abiding because Christ is the Word. We're not going to go into any greater detail than that. Just try to get your interest in this all-encompassing nature of Christ, or the Anointed One. Then Jesus said unto them, yet a little while is the light with you. Walk while you have the light, lest darkness come upon you. For he that walketh in darkness knows not whither he goeth. So what is walking in darkness? You don't know where you're going. But the issue becomes, why are they in darkness? I remember reading in Isaiah many years ago, the prophet saying, I would give you light, but you're blind, so it wouldn't do any good. And I would open your eyes, but you're in darkness, so it wouldn't do any good. So this darkness that the whole world was in, the whole world lieth in darkness. What is that darkness? That darkness wasn't the devil's darkness. This darkness was an imposed darkness over understanding, over the ability to see, over the ability to hear, and the ability to reason. God imposed that on the entire world. You can read, we're going to read it several times here, because that's what the prophets foretold. Now, why in the world would you tell everybody that they had to believe, all still here in this same book, why would you tell everybody that they had to believe and then blind them from being able to do so? That's why he said, that Jesus said, I did not come to condemn the world, that God didn't send his son into the world to condemn the world, but the world through him might be saved. And might be is not in there. I will correct myself every time, that the world through him saved. So there is something wrong with that statement on its face, because the fact of it is, if that happened, that God sent his son into the world so that all believers could be saved, and yet God did not send his son into the world to condemn the world, you're condemned already by the fact that you were not able to believe. Maybe he says something about that here. Now they were not able, they did not believe on him. I'm sorry, I've got to back up. I've skipped but though he had done many works, I've got to back up a little more. I don't know. Yes, verse 36. While you have light, believe in the light, that you may be the children of the light. That's what I want to do. I want to be a child of the light, don't you? These things spake Jesus and departed and hid himself from them. Isn't that something? He says, I'm the light, and now I'm hiding. But though he had done so many miracles before them, those that believers are supposed to be doing also, they believed not on him. I remember reading that the first time and it knocking me completely backward in my mind. I didn't fall backward. But I was knocked completely senseless. It threw my whole brain into another world. Verse 38, that the saying of Isaiah the prophet might be fulfilled. Now, wait a minute. He says that nobody believed, and then he gives a reason for it. That the saying of Isaiah the prophet could be fulfilled. Wait a minute. God said, I love the world so much, I'm sending my son, that whoever believeth in him will be saved. But I did not send my son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. How do you save people? Through your son, when you've required them to believe, and by virtue of the fact they have not, you have indeed condemned the world by sending your son. Oh no, it's not God condemned. They condemn themselves. I'm glad I can get tickled at what Christians say. I'm glad that what they say has no eternal consequence at all. But I would love to see people living in peace in this life instead of waiting and dreading to see whether or not they're going to make it. That's a saying, and again, I just have to emphasize this. But though he had done so many miracles before them, yet they believed not on him that. And the word that is H-I-N-A. And it is in order that, because, to the intent, this is the reason, that's why, this is why. Why did they not believe? So that Isaiah the prophet could be fulfilled, who said, Lord, who hath believed our report? And to whom is the arm of the Lord revealed? Well, evidently not to them yet miracles. Wait a minute. He did miracles. He healed the sick, raised the dead. Evidently that didn't reveal what needed to be revealed, or in the way it needed to be revealed. Therefore, listen at verse 39. They could not believe. I sat here and watched a 26-year-old man raised in church read this and just absolutely go into another world. Therefore they could not believe, because that Isaiah saith again. So he's repeating once again what Isaiah has to say. He hath blinded their eyes and hardened their hearts, that they should not see with their eyes, nor understand with their heart, and be converted, and I should heal them. Wait. I thought being converted and being healed was the goal. It was the goal. It was just believing was not the method. You read it for yourself and come up with something else if you like, but that is, it only says this. And it says that the reason that Isaiah prophesied that they'd be blinded, hardened, not able to hear, not able to see, because if they ever see, if they ever understand with their heart, they would be converted. And I should, and it's I should, and again, I should is not in there. If they did believe, they'd be made whole. If they believed, made whole. Converted, made whole. But God said, I've got to stop this. I'm going to require that they believe, but that's just the bait because it's not the plan. These things, he's continuing to talk about Isaiah here. These things said Isaiah when he saw his glory. So evidently the glory of Christ was not that people would believe in him. Isaiah saw his glory and started prophesying that everybody would be blinded and not be able to believe. Why? Well, let's hope God has some other plan other than believing. If not, there's been bad news for modern man, that's for sure. Nevertheless, among the chief rulers, and he says, now I'm going to be honest with you, though, among the chief rulers also many believed on him. But because of the Pharisees, they did not confess him, lest they should be put out of the synagogue. And you know what believing requires, according to Romans, according to what Peter taught? If you're not willing to confess him, you don't really believe in him. So there's no believers here. For they love the praises of men more than the praises of God. Now we're just continuing reading in John chapter 12. Jesus cried and said unto them, He that believeth on me, believeth not on me, but on him that sent me. But they couldn't believe. Please don't let that drop out of your mind. And he that seeth me, seeth him that sent me. He's saying we're one and the same. And I am come a light into the world. Wait, I have come a light into the world to the entire world that is blinded from being able to see me. I am come a light into the world that whosoever believeth on me should not abide in darkness. Now, we've got a little conundrum going on here, a quinky-dink. God has required all to believe. Jesus came as the light of the world, but Isaiah the prophet said nobody's going to be able to believe because the same God that sent the same Christ into the world, not to condemn the world, but to save the world, and said you have to believe in him, has openly now declared through John's writings that Jesus said, I have come as a light into a world that can't see me, they can't hear me, they can't believe me. Evidently, God had a different plan. Because he says, remember, he said just a few verses, he said, if they did that, I'd have to redeem them. I'd have to save them. If they did believe, they would have to. But you know what? If that worked that way, if somebody had believed and it worked, guess what would have been terrible? Then everybody would have to believe. What? Let me say it again. What would be so bad if somebody had believed and God had saved them? Then the whole world would have to believe. What? I don't know if you're as shocking as that is. God saved us from having to believe. He blinded people right in front of Christ, born of a virgin, getting ready to go to the cross to take all of the judgment of the world. And he blinded everybody from being able to see. But he had already said, all you got to do is believe. All you got to do is believe. Isn't that here what you hear from Christianity all the time? All you got to do is believe. It's just so precious. All you got to do is believe that this guy was born of a virgin and raised from the dead 2,024 years ago. It's it's just so precious. Can't you see it? He died for you. He died for you. And in an emotional upheaval, people say, I believe, I believe, I believe. Well, if I'd have been explaining to you about Martians in the same context, you'd be crying saying you believed in Martians. Didn't get you saved, though. It didn't get you redeemed. Believing plays a role, but not in redeeming the world, not in making everyone the same in Christ, in God. And if any man hear my voice and believe not, all right, whoa, wow, whoa, now we've got Jesus. Everybody's been required to believe, but Isaiah prophesied nobody will believe because that wasn't God's plan. Because if one person believed, then that's going to be the plan. So we had to make sure there were no believers. We had to make sure, oh my God, make sure that nobody believes. Make sure nobody believes. And if any man hear my words and believe not, I judge him not. For I came not to judge the world, but to save the world. Sometimes you just have to read, as Paul Harvey used to say, the rest of the story. Paul had this understanding, and he taught throughout the book of Romans, trying to correct the false teaching that believing was the key to redemption. The entire book of Romans is Paul teaching to Peter's church in Rome, which they say is still there today. I don't doubt it. And Paul is attempting to teach that what you're teaching that took place as you were following Jesus, he said you got to believe. I understand why these guys heard and taught. You got to believe, 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 you got to believe. You've got to believe, though, that Paul was not hearing and absorbing that message. Paul got a different message in 3 years of teachings from Christ out in the wilderness. That's why Paul didn't come out saying, oh my God, you got to believe. Paul never said that. Paul said, I know him. What did Paul come out of this with? Man, you can read this. The book of Romans honestly ends in chapter 11. I know it's got 16 there, but you would not, it's amazing at the extent that the Catholic Church went to try to obscure the message of Paul. But Paul's writings are in here, and I'm going to give you the last word, 48 minutes, of what Paul had to say about the matter that we just went through the book of John on. For God hath concluded all in unbelief, that he might have mercy upon all. You see, it was vitally important that nobody believe. And what is the message of the church? It is vitally important that everybody believe. What did Paul teach? It was vitally important that nobody believe. Oh, the depths. It would be absolutely malpractice of a Bible teacher to not read Paul's euphoria that comes after this dynamic insight. Oh, the depths of the riches of both the wisdom and the knowledge of God. How unsearchable are his judgments and his ways past finding out. For who hath known the mind of the Lord, or who hath been his counselor, or who hath first given to him belief, and it should be recompensed to him, salvation. For of him, through him, to him are all things, to whom be glory forever and ever. Amen. Now, Mike, why did you add those words? Because that's what the subject's talking about. For who has ever first given God belief, and God should repay him with redemption. Nobody. Things are screwed up, folks. They're screwed up bad. And on the most elementary parts of the gospel. I may go through John chapter 10 with you just to cap this off next week. Goodness, we've got almost an hour teaching on here. I guess I really should do 15 minutes every week because I do this every time. Love you guys. Let's get this turned right side up. It is vitally important that people understand that they do not have to believe to be redeemed.